entertainment capital of the world, yesterday's icon swiftly yields the stage, paving the way for the dawn of tomorrow's stars. But perhaps the next star of the show in Las Vegas, or should I say, the eyesore of Las Vegas, had sat on deck for 2 decades. The Fontainebleau Las Vegas, which replaced the long-abandoned Las Vegas icon, became an abandoned relic of its own. For 16 years, no photo of the Las Vegas Strip was taken, without its largest resort sitting in the background unfinished. But why? In this video, we'll tell the full story of the cursed plot on the north side of the Las Vegas Strip, how the Fontainebleau became the quintessential story of 2 separate global events, and reveal how in the end, the resort became the biggest comeback story in the history of real estate development. My name is LaBreece, and this is Modern Ruins, episode 22. This episode of Modern Ruins is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Hey college basketball fans, tournament time is finally here, and with DraftKings Sportsbook, the excitement never stops. This year's tournament will have the craziest upsets yet, and now is your time to get in on all the action and turn every game into a heart-pounding thrill ride. Right now, all new customers who bet $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Turn your love for college basketball into big-time winnings by using your $150 in bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same game, including total points scored, number of rebounds by your favorite player, and more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use promo code LaBreeceTV and bet just $5 on any wager and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code LABREECETV. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Prior to the Fontainebleau project, the site located near the Las Vegas Strip's most northern point was occupied by El Rancho Hotel and Casino. Deserving of its own video, the resort originally opened as the Thunderbird in 1948 and had only about 80 rooms before nearly tripling that amount 2 years later. It had a Navajo theme and proudly displayed portraits of prominent Native Americans and memorabilia throughout. The Thunderbird had been constructed by local real estate developer Marion Hicks. After years of speculation and various ideas for the project, it was co-owned by Nevada's Lieutenant Governor Clifford Jones, which led the resort to be frequently visited by notable politicians, fueling its luxury reputation and prominent status. The Thunderbird became so popular that an overflow hotel called the Algers was constructed on the property to meet demand while architects debated how to enlarge the thriving resort. New ownership would expand the Thunderbird over the next decade, including the addition of a quarter-horse racetrack in 1963, but sold it off after that. And so began a carousel of ownership that led to name changes such as to the Silverbird in 1977, and finally to El Rancho Hotel and Casino in 1982, which then new owner Ed Torres had named in honor of the original El Rancho Las Vegas that had closed in 1960. This was around the time in Las Vegas when most owners were trying to save iconic Las Vegas resorts by adding amenities and building huge towers to dramatically increase the number of rooms. But these fixes were subpar compared to the new era of mega resorts the Strip was entering. And once Steve Wynn opened the Mirage in 1989, it was game over for most of the 1950s resorts and gambling parlors that had given the Vegas Strip the reputation it had to that point. Now, it was only a matter of time as Wynn and others began one by one demolishing Las Vegas's past to construct Las Vegas's future. Only 3 years after the Mirage had opened, and only 4 years after completing a massive renovation, El Rancho would permanently close. Many thought they could successfully bring the property back, but no one did. And for the next 8 years, the property became the largest eyesore on the Strip, sitting abandoned and rotting away under the Nevada sun. In 1997, a man by the name of Jeffrey Sofer, head of his father's real estate development firm Turnberry Associates, bought a 15-acre parcel of land on the back of the El Rancho property that had previously been the Thunderbird Downs horse racetrack and planned to construct condominiums. By this point, the former El Rancho resort proved such an eyesore and liability to their project that Turnberry chose to buy the remaining 20-acre property outright for an astounding $45 million. Salvageable contents were auctioned off, but their retrieval was limited to the first 2 floors over concerns about the structure's condition, and on October 3, 2000, the main tower of the resort was imploded, marking the end of what had been an enduring nightmare to surrounding businesses. Turnberry originally planned to construct a resort of their own on the property, settling on a London-themed concept after the recent success of the Venice-themed Venetian resort, but the plans were abandoned after the tourism crash and recession that began in 2001, and the property continued to sit idle as simply a pile of dust. Once the downturn subsided, Turnberry purchased the historic Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, and given the resort's notoriety and luxury status, Sofer saw an opportunity to use the brand power to their advantage and spun off their own company called Fontainebleau Resorts with Jeffrey Sofer at the helm. Their plan was to construct properties under the company's namesake all over the world, and decided to start with their now long abandoned and primely located site on the Las Vegas Strip. Sofer started by purchasing the still-standing Algiers Hotel on the southern portion of the property, adding a little over 3.5 acres to their now 25-acre plot, and the sale of the Algiers to Turnberry Associates was complete in March 2005 at a cost of $97 million. In May, the company unveiled their plans for a 3.5 million square feet, 63-story, and 3,900-room mega resort that would be called the Fontainebleau Las Vegas. It would be the tallest building in Nevada and feature a grand theater, spa inspired by Iceland's Blue Lagoon, 100,000 square foot casino, 24 restaurants, and a 300,000 square foot shopping mall. Initial estimates stated the project would top $2.8 billion. Ground was broken in February 2007, and construction began while final drawings and engineering plans were still in progress, with officials stating the Fontainebleau Las Vegas would open in fall 2009. This is a common practice for projects of this scale. Skyscrapers, football stadiums, and other equivalent developments typically begin construction before having everything sorted out in order to speed up the process. This sometimes results in increased cost and occasionally delays in the event rework is necessary, but engineering every detail and system in such a massive building can take years to complete. Considering what was about to happen, putting final designs and interior aesthetics off until the end may have been better for the structure long term. For the first 6 months, construction progressed just like any other building. That was until August 2007 when a worker died after a 30-foot fall on the property, which was preceded by a protest of the Ironworkers Union the month prior over safety concerns. It would be only days later that portions of 3 separate stories of the oversized parking garage would collapse, and while no one was hurt or injured, these delays were all signs of much more systemic problems officials on the project were facing. Before beginning construction on the Fontainebleau, the company had spent billions to renovate their Miami resort, which was in progress when they broke ground in Nevada. Fontainebleau Resorts had sold portions of ownership on their namesake property in Las Vegas to both domestic and international interests in order to finance construction. They also planned to sell 1,000 of the resort's rooms as condos, in addition to seeking a $4 billion loan from multiple banks, once again both domestically and abroad, with the intent to consolidate debt from both projects and complete their Las Vegas property. However, these loans were heavily leveraged by the project itself, meaning that if the project wasn't completed on time or a real estate crash occurred, the Fontainebleau Las Vegas project would be in a world of trouble. And coincidentally, that's exactly what happened. What started as people with bad credit getting loans they couldn't afford quickly monsooned through financial markets, who amplified the negative consequences of real estate defaults to a scale that no one thought was possible. And the crisis quickly spread around the world, leading to some of the largest corporate failures in U.S. history. Homes flooded the housing market as millions found out they couldn't afford the mortgages they took out, and this inventory influx sent real estate prices across all sectors to record lows. Now, there was almost no market for Fontainebleau's condo units. Ultimately, liquidity in banks dried up. So now, not only was the value of the Fontainebleau Las Vegas, which was unfinished and had been delayed for safety and logistical reasons, now worth significantly less than the value needed for leverage in the construction loans, but the banks simply didn't have the money to follow through on a multi-billion-dollar loan, not to mention some of the financiers having a conflict of interest with competing developments. This led Sofer and the ownership group behind the property to sue their lenders, alleging that they failed to provide funds to complete construction. However, the lenders responded by saying vaguely that the borrowers had been subject to, quote, 1 or 2 instances of default that disqualified them from the funds, which the ownership group denied. Before the lawsuit was filed, the topping out ceremony, when the final beam is placed, had taken place on November 14, 2008, in what proved to be the final project milestone of the decade, leaving the Fontainebleau Las Vegas idle at nearly 70% complete. Construction fencing, a half-glass sheathed iron skeleton, and a massive construction crane were now part of a frozen recession-esque time capsule, with Vegas locals being left in disbelief as the savior they thought had saved them from the nightmare eyesore that was El Rancho became its sequel. After filing the lawsuit, the true financial position of the project soon came out. Construction was significantly over budget on a property that was now worth less than originally estimated. Condo sales weren't adding up, and financial statements Sofer and the ownership group produced grossly misrepresented their financial standing to lenders after being underwater on 2 multi-billion-dollar heavily leveraged projects. To make matters worse, now that construction had substantially slowed down, subcontractors and consulting firms began filing their own lawsuits, which only deepened the hole the project was in. And as a result, Sofer and several leaders stepped away from the project, and construction roles were laid off. Faced with no other choice, the ownership group filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on June 9, 2009. This allowed them to restructure their debt, but was only the beginning of a long road ahead. At this point, private investors had completely backed out, leaving Turnberry in their own hole, and the project owed hundreds of millions of dollars to thousands of creditors. With Bank of America acting on behalf of the project's lenders, the bankruptcy suit went to trial, and while debt restructuring and other bankruptcy proceedings would continue to be worked out over the next decade, the judge in the case ruled that the property needed to be sold as soon as possible. So Sofer, who had been on the project for a near decade and a half, was now forced to walk away from his mega project with only a few months' notice. Ulico Inc., one of the project's lenders who wasn't being represented by Bank of America, then offered to finance the remaining construction after having already invested $500 million of their own funds into the property. However, no arrangement came to fruition. Executives from Apollo Management, Wynn Resorts, and Penn National Gaming then toured the property multiple times. However, only Penn actually placed a bid, offering an unbelievable $50 million for the property. That's considering that Turnberry had originally spent nearly $150 million just to acquire the land for the project, and billions had already been spent on construction. That's when hedge fund manager Carl Icahn stepped in, placing a max bid of $156 million for the property. More realistic than Penn, but still dumbfoundingly low in hindsight. Icahn had pioneered the activist investor strategy, where he would buy such a significant share of a company that they would have to bend to his wishes, and this strategy had made him a billionaire. Back in 1998, he had bought the Stratosphere Hotel and Casino on the Strip out of bankruptcy court and some surrounding lots for around $300 million all in, and sold it all for a $1 billion profit to Goldman Sachs in 2007, just before the real estate crash, and now was poised to do it again. He took over the Fontainebleau project in February 2010, and seeing no economic and tourism recovery imminent, he decided not to resume construction, instead auctioning off already purchased furniture and fixtures, and dismantling the site's construction crane. By 2015, after sitting abandoned for 5 years under Icahn's ownership, Clark County requested that he clean up the building with some sort of wrapping, which he agreed to do, and subsequently sold the building afterward for a 400% gain. He sold it to a group of East Coast investment firms led by Stephen Witkoff, whose plan was to radically redesign significant portions of the resort and complete construction by the end of the decade. He would open it as the Drew in honor of his son, who had died from a drug overdose in 2011. Funding was secured from a collection of Wall Street banks, and a partnership with Marriott International was announced, and construction resumed in the spring of 2018. However, it wouldn't take long for things to go wrong, as just after construction restarted, a man trespassed on the property and set several fires that totaled $10 million in damage. On top of that, Witkoff said that final designs and engineering work would push the grand opening of the Drew out to 2022. This was 2019, folks. In what must be an incredibly rare feat, the construction of this mega project had taken so long that not only did one global event get in its way, but two. Once the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March 2020, the entire tourism industry once again shut down, and construction on the Drew was halted. It was the same nightmare from 10 years prior all over again, as banks withheld funds and contractors filed liens against the property. So now what? The Drew had become the disastrous sequel to El Rancho and its former self. A worldwide financial crisis and pandemic 10 years apart had destined the project for failure 2 times over, and bankrupted dozens of companies, banks, and individuals who had done whatever it took to make this resort work. What project of this scale comes to mind when you hear all these setbacks? That's right, none, as this scenario was almost unprecedented in modern times. Well, everyone likes a comeback story, and to come back from a series of setbacks this significant would take someone with a resilient passion to finally see this project through, and at this point, there was probably only a handful of those. And so, Jeffrey Sofer said the pandemic was the exact opportunity he needed to get his dream project back, buying the Drew in partnership with the Koch brothers 16 years after he first announced the resort, returning it to its original name in a construction commencement ceremony on November 9, 2021, when construction ceremoniously resumed. Witkoff sold the property back to Sofer for only $350 million, taking a near 50% loss, and that's excluding the personal investments he had made. When Sofer first sold Fontainebleau out of bankruptcy in 2010, construction was 70% complete. Now that 11 years or so had passed, engineers stated that the property sat around 75% complete. But despite this, considering how outdated the completed portions of the resort were, Sofer had no choice but to gut around 1,800 finished hotel rooms. He was, however, more or less forced to use the original floor plans as designed in 2008 and reduced retail space to cut costs. At this point, the entire hybrid condo concept was scrapped, and those floors would be repurposed into luxury suites and penthouses. This time around, the resort was completed without a hitch, and the official grand opening of the Fontainebleau Las Vegas took place on December 13, 2023, to coincide with Sofer's 55th birthday. The festivities were attended by hundreds of invited guests and celebrities of the day, such as Tom Brady, Kim Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, Ivanka Trump, Keith Urban, Aaron Paul, Bryan Cranston, Cher, Lenny Kravitz, Sylvester Stallone, and countless more, with Paul Anka and Justin Timberlake serving as the night's entertainment, the public opening occurring near midnight. In total, the resort was completed at a cost of $3.7 billion and was now the second most expensive development in Las Vegas to build, only to Resorts World, which had cost $4.3 billion and opened in 2021. Fontainebleau was completed with 3,644 rooms and stood 737 feet tall. It featured 15 of 36 total restaurants and bars at opening, and 96,500 square feet for 35 retailers on its first two floors, and had 55,000 square feet of event space, in addition to matching its Miami counterpart's 55,000 square foot spa. The casino has 42-foot ceilings and 173,000 square feet of gaming area, which includes 1,300 slot machines and 128 table games, with several restricted areas for high-limit gambling. In terms of entertainment, Fontainebleau ended up having a relatively small venue called the Blue Live Theater that seats only about 3,800. The venue's manager, Live Nation, stated that the theater will focus on touring acts rather than residences. In terms of clubs, LIV, or LIV, the main club at Fontainebleau Miami Beach, opened a 55,000 square foot counterpart in Las Vegas with 35,000 square feet of outdoor space, the latter of which is set to open later in 2024. In modern history, it is unheard of for a project to take this long to complete. Despite everything going against it, Las Vegas is really the only place where a story like this could happen. There are so few real estate markets on Earth where something of this scale remains valuable in the long term, even if it's incomplete, and all the developers who came to acquire the property over the years were very fortunate that the major aspects of the building didn't go out of fashion in a decade and a half, let alone face worse vandalism than the building received. Considering that the Fontainebleau Las Vegas hasn't been even open for a year yet, it's hard to gauge whether this project's been worth the wait. The final $3.7 billion cost doesn't even include all the loan interest, legal fees, and property taxes that were paid over to the Fontainebleau's dormancy. So even if it's a smash hit, it's going to be a very long time before it really pays itself off. But if all the developments surrounding Las Vegas recently are any indicator, it seems like it eventually will. How long that will take, only time will tell. And on that note, thanks for watching. Subscribe to LaBreeceTV for more Modern Ruins content. And be sure to comment what modern ruin you'd like us to cover next.